All right, guys. Who knew you had to turn like the camera on?
I know.
Someday we'll be back in the classroom where we belong. All right. Does everybody have a copy of the book? Hello? Yes, I got one yes. Okay, so I guess we do. All right. Let's start on page 5, which is chapter 1. Walking through before closing. So for those of you who have never had the thrill of doing your final walkthrough before your first closing, let's review what the whole thing is about. Can anyone give me an idea what the purpose might be to do a walkthrough the morning of, on occasion, the night before of the closing? What is the reason that the buyer and the buyer's agent are going through the property? Come on.
Is it to make sure that everything is as it should be based on the contract and all repairs were corrected?
Wonderful. Very good. So the property is in the condition it was when you put the offer in, and or corrections were made, alterations were done, something that has been agreed upon. It's a reiteration that we're all on the same page here, right? So you don't want to see that somebody got pissy in those last 60 days and punched a hole in the door in the bedroom, right? Okay, so it's those kind of things. In the city of Philadelphia, I know we have some newer agents who primarily work the burbs, but in the city of Philadelphia, it is the responsibility of the buyer's agent to get a water meter reading and a gas meter reading. Why is this? Does anybody know why we do this in Philadelphia?
Is to distribute the charges at settlement.
Correct, but why do we do that? In the city of Philadelphia, water and gas are lienable. If there is an outstanding balance of water and or gas, it will be satisfied at the table. Everything is paid off. We're even Steven. We run into hiccups on our title report in the city of Philadelphia when a meter hasn't been read in a really long time. It's not unheard of to have a title company want to hold $10,000 worth of monies for a water meter issue, especially on a rehab. Property's been vacant 15 years. Somebody bought it, rehabbed it. The meter was stolen out of it for the brass. It is what it is. Unfortunately, there were charges that accumulated for those 15 years. Once they put the new meter on, whoops, we got issues. So for any of you who are going to be working in the city and doing a rehab, you need to get some clarification if A, there is a meter in there, which we're going to learn even what the thing looks like, and B, when was that a recent installment, and has there been a complete cycle to produce a bill? Okay, so these are real hiccups. But note, across the board in Philadelphia, you got to get the water meter reading and the gas. We used to take a piece of paper and a pen and write it down. Now you have your iPhone, your Droid, whatever the hell it is you got, and you take a picture of the meter. So you're taking a picture of the number. We're going to review that again once we start talking about these meters. So how do we walk through a property? You open the front door, everybody runs in. It's your job to herd the cats. They're all excited, okay? Your job is to say, okay, guys, come on, we have a job here to do. You want to go in and make sure things are functioning. So you're going to walk through the property as if you're living in there. You hit the light switch. Does the ceiling fan go on? Does the light go on? You look at the walls, the ceiling. You go in the dining room. You look at the ceiling. Many times a bathroom is above a dining room in a twin and or a row home. You want to see if there's any water stains. You go in the kitchen. Now we have to see if the kitchen is functioning. It has a lot of equipment. You open up the refrigerator. Is it cold? Yeah, good. Does the gas turn on as it should and all of the burners light? You're going to turn the oven on. Now, don't do what I do. I forget I turn the oven on. It's a bad habit, but I do it. So you got to turn the oven on and keep going because it's going to take a few minutes for it to heat up, right? You're going to hit the dishwasher just to hit it go on. You're not going to wait an hour and a half to do a full cycle. Yep, it kicked on, shut it off. Run the water, you hit the garbage disposal. Yep, that worked. The microwave. Microwave should not run without something in it. You could take a wet tissue, wet paper towel, throw it in, hit it for 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. Yeah, it kicked on good. All right. So we've gone through the kitchen. Things seem to be working well. Now we go down to the lower level. In the city of Philadelphia, it is mandated for carbon monoxide. Now we have an in-house form in Loop and also in Command or wherever it's at, okay? Wherever you go for your templates, right? It says that within 15 feet of sleeping area, there has to be a carbon monoxide. So if we use as an example, something I often use is the standard 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 2-story house in Deep South Philly. If there has to be a carbon monoxide within 15 feet of sleeping area, how many carbon monoxides do I need on the second floor? Hello? You know you're out there. Okay? Let's review. 2-story, 3-bedroom, 1-bath row home in South Philly. How many carbon monoxide detectors do I need on the second floor if a carbon monoxide has to be within 15 feet of a sleeping area?
Probably
Use 1 or 2.
I'm sorry?
I'd say 3.
You think 3. Okay, any other thoughts here?
I would say 1 or 2.
You say 1 or 2. Okay, so I want you to picture yourself at the top of a staircase of a row home, 3-bedroom, 1-bath. On the second floor, there will be 4 doors, 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. If you stand in the middle of that hall, are you within 15 feet of all these doors? In most cases, the answer is yes. Therefore, you need 1 carbon monoxide on the second floor. It would be wise to have a carbon monoxide at the top of the basement steps and at the source of the energy in the basement. So if it's a boiler system, if it's a hot air system, it would be helpful to have 1 down there. When you're doing your pre-settlement walkthrough, because you have had the seller sign that in-house addendum that indicates there will be carbon monoxides within 15 feet of sleeping, and you need smoke detectors on every level to make sure they're there. Oftentimes, especially in a vacant home, you will find when you go to do the walkthrough, 3 brand new smoke detectors and a carbon monoxide or whatever. You know, the seller is keeping to what they signed and they're there brand new and the buyer's going to hook them up. So just make sure you have them. If they're there, you want to, at all possible, reach out and touch them, right? To make sure the alarm's going off. The newer ones have a 10-year kind of life expectancy. You can't open them. You can't take a battery out, because we've learned that's been an issue for years and years and years. So make sure you check on that. So when you go down the lower level, you want to make sure you have a carbon monoxide and a smoke detector floating around there somewhere. And you're going to look around. Is there water on the floor? Is there something backing up? Does it smell funky? Use this thing in the middle of your head. I have a very poor olfactory, and I tell my buyers that all the time. So I remind them, if you smell something funky, you got to tell Vicki, because she may or may not pick it up. If there is a funky smell in that basement, there could be a backup on a sewer line. There could be an interruption in the U-trap, and we'll talk about what that is. There are sewer gases coming up from somewhere, or there could be a cracked sewer line. Okay, so these are things. It's important. You got to use all your senses. You're going to get your meter reading for your water and your gas while you're down there. In most cases, the gas meter is inside the home in Philadelphia, and it's on the front wall 95% of the time. So that's the wall that's next to the street and the sidewalk, right? That's the front wall. All right, so now we go upstairs all the way to the second floor, and this is really important. You really got to look at the ceilings, especially the back bedroom. In most row homes, because we have flat roofs, the back bedroom corner is where the box is, and that's an area that is on the roof where the water runs down. It's at a very mild pitch, but it runs down to this box, which then goes down the gutters, right? And if a box gets clogged, tennis balls are a huge culprit of this. It then prevents the water to go down the gutters, right? And it builds up on the floor of the roof, and now we get a leak. So it's very important to be looking at the ceiling in all the bedrooms, but primarily the back bedroom, to make sure there is no leaks, right? You go in the bathroom. We're going to flush the toilet. We're going to turn the water on in the vanity, open the bottom, and look and see if anything's dripping. That's your U-trap, okay? And we're going to look and see if anything's dripping. We're going to turn the shower on, pull the plug, push the button, whatever it is. Make sure the shower's working. Great, everything's good. Go back down, go shut your oven off. Because see, I forgot. So you got to go back, shut the oven off. You feel it? Oh yeah, it's warm. Great. We have to remind our buyers to call the utility companies. The utilities need to be transferred in the name of the buyer. Now, this has become a big problem in Philadelphia in the past 7 to 10 years. The electric company, God bless them, just randomly shuts off the electric because the seller said, I'm moving, disconnect. First off, that's always the wrong term. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I could put that on my phone if I knew how to do it. Okay, so, calling the utilities. So if the seller calls and says, I'm moving on the 15th, shut off my electric. Well, the electric company says, geez, Vic's moving on the 15th. I got to shut this off. Ah! Now the buyer's coming on the 15th to check to make sure the refrigerator's cold and the lights work and all this other fun stuff. We can't if there's no electric. Be very careful. Make sure you tell both your sellers and your buyers that we're not shutting things off. We are transferring the name. Shut off is not a term anybody should be using. It is a transfer because it becomes a big problem. If the outside air temperature is above 65 degrees, hence today, you now in your walkthrough can go over to that thermostat and turn the AC on to make sure it's working, right? You put your hand there, ooh, it's nice and cool. You say to them, you want me to leave it on? You know, you'll be back in a few hours. Yay! If the outside temperature is not above 65, don't do that. Do not turn that central air on. Same thing with the heat. Now, the heat you can run at 90-degree weather. None of that matters. But you do want to check the heat. You want to turn it on, put your hand over the vent or the radiator or whatever we're working with to make sure it heats up, right? Now, there is a form. And shame on me, I can't remember the name, but it's settlement walkthrough form. PAR has it. I'm really encouraging agents to use this. This is another layer of protection for you. that you and the buyer will sign that you went through the walkthrough and everything was fine, and or maybe we found something that didn't work, right? And that adds as another layer of protection. As the broker, I deal with logistics all day long. You guys would be running with your hair on fire in the woods if you only knew the logistics that happen in this business. And I try to warn you people, you've got to think outside of the box every single day. What if? MetLife does a commercial with Snoopy, and he sticks his head up and his nose is in the air, and he's doing the little dance, the what if in life. I can't tell you how important those few words are. What if? You always have to think to the next level. So using this form as you're walking out of the house or sitting there at the closing table is another layer of protection for you, okay? All right, so it talks about on page 5 different things that you'll be checking: the appliances, the heating, water. You're gonna look at the ceilings, the basement. It talks all about the same things we just did. Note if there's any odor, such as gas or sewer smells, any physical damage inside, outside of the property, right? Utility services, very important. You get your buyers and sellers on board on how that's handled. If the home has a garage door opener, you do want to check that to make sure the I-beam is working correctly. So you turn it up and you throw your leg under it and it should stop and you know it's working. Keys and locks. It's not uncommon for a buyer agent to bring a gift to the closing or offer a gift as a housewarming type of thing for the buyer. Very common practice, right? There are agents who have worked out some sort of a relationship with a locksmith and will pay to have either the tumblers rolled, which means the doorknob's nice, it's pretty. Why do I have to take it off? Well, you don't. They can go in and reconfigure that key, you know, it has all the little grooves, and they can reconfigure and make you a new key so you don't have to remove the handle that you happen to like. So that's something to consider. If that's not what you're thinking, it's really important that you remind your buyers to change those locks, especially if a property was tenant occupied at some point. God only knows how many keys are out floating around, right? Okay, so let's think about that. We talked about our smoke detectors and carbon monoxide. We want to make sure they're there. All right, now move on to page 9, environmental and safety concerns. On the right side, there is an artist's rendering of a double hung wood window. Now, for years, I've been preaching and no one's been listening, that one of the biggest culprits for lead poisoning is from wood double hung windows. So what is a double hung window? A double hung window is when you could take the bottom of the window and push it up. Woo, it's hot, let's get some air. Or you take the top of the window and you slide it down so it pushes air out for you, right? That's double hung. It either comes down or goes up. These two separate windows, they function independently. The friction of the two windows passing each other causes dust. Lead is heavier than air, and so the lead dust falls to the floor. That's where baby Mary Jane, who's half walking, half crawling, puts everything in her mouth, is getting this lead in her hands, in her mouth, right? There was an article in the Inquirer 8 to 10 years ago, I guess. And it spoke about double hung windows. And I was like, Jesus, someone finally must have heard me. This owner was a pediatrician and bought a beautiful home in Grays Ferry, one of those neighborhoods where these gorgeous, gorgeous homes are, right? And windows are a problem because windows are costly and a lot of people don't replace these windows. So she bought this beautiful home and it must have dawned on her one day, you know, I have a baby, not for nothing. Maybe I ought to get the house checked for lead. Yeah, how about that? Not only did her house pop hot, but her daughter popped hot because of these windows. And the whole article was really about lead, but really emphasizing the windows were the biggest culprit here. As a buyer's agent, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility when you're with your buyer. And in the burbs, there's beautiful homes in Montgomery County and Bucks County that are older and have wood windows. You have a responsibility to bring that to the attention of your buyer as, oh, by the way, the windows function. They are not a material defect. We are not asking for new windows. But note, they are wood. And the age of the property, it is very likely 7 layers back, there could be lead. 1978 was the last year manufacturers put lead in the manufacturing of paint. Therefore, that's why we have our lead-based paint form that the seller signs. And you don't need that form if the property was built after 1978, right? Okay. So, but you do have a duty as an agent representing that buyer to remind them of what the material is of these windows. And make sure they understand if they have small children or planning on children, this is something they may need to investigate to replace them. You just have to do your due diligence, okay? Now, in 33 years, I've had one lead-based paint done. It was done by a physician. She was an obstetrician gynecologist, unmarried, had the test done. We were in the art museum, and the home is, at the time, was 100 plus years old. Subterranean kitchen, they had a spiral staircase. Oddly enough, they could not find lead. The inspector kept shaking his head. I can't believe this. But the property had been rehabbed and remodeled over the years so that they must have drywalled everything over. Therefore, they were not coming up with any lead since 1978. It's not commonly done, but it can happen. All right, next we're going to talk about asbestos. Does anybody know what asbestos is? Or the purpose of asbestos? What's the purpose of asbestos in a home?
Isn't hi Vicki, this is Graham. I'm a new member with Black Label.
Hi.
Isn't the purpose of asbestos to it's a material that's near like a fire area to protect against, you know, fire hazards, but it's very flammable. So it's not recommended or allowed anymore.
Oh, okay. So there are some fire retardant parts to it, but the biggest purpose of asbestos was designed to form an insulation. Okay, so those of you who either wander out in the burbs or work out in the burbs, I want you to get a visual of a development. The development built in 1950, 1960. You'll see a lot of the houses, and they're still out there, with very large panels that are, or shingle type of look, that are probably 24 inches by 18 inches. And these are nailed up all the way around the house. They're asbestos insulation. There's asbestos wraps. A fibrous material that was to wrap a pipe to keep it from freezing. Typically, 9 by 9 floor tiles are almost always asbestos base. Now, the only way to confirm any of what I just said is we have to take a little sample and we send it off to a laboratory. But there's some certain basic things you can learn about and have a general idea. The 9 by 9 tiles are on the floor and they're fairly harmless. Even if they break, they're extremely brittle. Where the biggest culprit of asbestosis falls is the inhaling of asbestos fibers. So if you see an asbestos wrapped pipe, now you got to first off think they're old, right? And as you touch it, you'll see this little poof of fibers. It'll go poof. Those are the culprits right there. Those little fibers go into the air and we inhale them into our very gentle lungs, alveoli, right? Now, I ran into a situation close to, 25 plus years ago. Big twin in Northwood, which is a neighborhood right off of Route 1, the boulevard, heading north before Harbison Avenue. Gorgeous, huge homes. This particular twin was at the end of the row and had a separate lot with it. I represented a restaurateur from Chinatown, and he was quite interested in this home. He had 2 little girls, and he had the side yard, and he wanted them to have swings. It's fabulous. Okay. We get in the basement, and bada bing, bada boom. There they are, the wraps. He spoke to a friend of his from City Hall. Of what caliber this person was, I have no idea. And the gentleman actually probably gave him some pretty good advice. Said to him, don't move them, leave them, but paint over them with a latex, no, I think it was oil-based paint. With an oil-based paint to encapsulate them. So when they could accidentally be squeezed, none of that poof of asbestos would come out. And that's how that was handled. On occasion, you're going to run into this with your home inspections, obviously with older homes, and then that's something that has to be dealt with. With the 9x9 tiles, is something you're probably going to find from Harbison Avenue north in the northern part of Philadelphia County, because of the age of a lot of those neighborhoods were built in the 50s and 60s. Not uncommon when it is suspicious that a 9x9 floor tile in a basement is asbestos. You may find a buyer who would put together on the reply to home inspection to ask the seller to have those removed. They're old, they're brittle. They pop up really easy. And generally what happens, no one's getting anybody EPA certified because of the cost factor. The seller just pops them all up. He has a mask on, he puts them in a black bag, and they go out in the trash. That's not your problem. You represent the buyer. When you get there, they're gone, and that's all you care about, okay? But just some ideas of where, when you're looking around a basement, that you might see asbestos on the outside of the home or in a garage, in a basement, wherever there's piping to help prevent freezing of the pipe in those real bitter winters, okay? Who knows what radon is? Come on, Burby people.
Yeah, I do. It's like comes from like the rocks or soil or something. It comes from underground. It's usually found in basements, not usually in like the 3rd or 2nd floors.
Correct. It's an odorless, sightless gas. It is the breakdown of uranium and rhenium from the soil. Now, with that said, there are pockets of this. First off, it's erratic. My house might have it, but the house next to me doesn't have it. Or they have it and I don't have it. Remember, the earth is full of plates and they're constantly moving, right? But there is geographic locations where it's really potent. Roxborough, Manayunk in the city has a tendency to run high. Wash West in the city can pop hot any given day on a radon test, and other locations throughout the city. East Falls can pop hot. East Falls, beautiful neighborhood. All right, now with that said, Bucks County runs rampant. Lower Eastern Montgomery County runs rampant. I sold new construction and settled in February of this year in Holland. It was the sample home of a small 12 house, 9 house development, something. The builder, knowing his location, built into the home everything needed to hook up radon remediation if needed, because he knew he was on a hot spot. We did our radon tests, the highest for me ever, it was 28.6 or something. I personally never had one that high. So no big deal. We said, sell or fix it. He's like, yeah. Hires a remediation company. They dropped in the crock the venting system. It's a motor that pulls air from subterraneally under the home, takes it up a PVC piping and goes above the roof line with it. It's retested, and it has to be below 0.04 picocurial, whatever those words are. At 4, though, has to be treated. So it can be no higher than 3.9, okay? So when your buyer says to you, who's buying in Fishtown, Northern Liberties, East Kensington, Vic, do I need to do this? I would hope your answer would be explaining the hazards. Long-term exposure to radon has been proven to be a carcinogenic, primarily lung cancer. Now, you also have to pay attention when your buyers are just jibber-jabbering, and they do a lot of that. They just jibber-jabber, right? You have to listen to what they're jibber-jabbering, because they are in a home that has a very high ceiling basement. It's a 9-foot ceiling. And they got a house full of kids. And they got one who's a teenager. I want to put Johnny down here. Your ears better perk up immediately. 2 things we have to take in consideration. He wants to put Johnny down here. That means he wants a Johnny to sleep down here. Sleeping is long-term exposure, right? Okay. So we have to think about radon right away. Here's another huge thing you must think of. Is there another way to get out of this basement? If that staircase coming down the kitchen is on fire, how the hell is Johnny getting out of there? He's not. Johnny's going to die. You need to know, people don't know this. You need to know that you have to bring this to their attention. Exact thing happened to me 15 years ago. Sold a beautiful stone home in Ronhurst, Northeast Philadelphia. High ceilings, 9 foot. The sellers had 2 sons. One was 23 and the other one was 3. Not really sure what happened. It was the same mom, but okay, that's what we got. Father says to me, oh my God, I can finish this off and I'm going to put Johnny down here. I said, John, if you're putting little Johnny down here, there's 2 things we got to take in consideration. One is, and I looked all the way across the basement and there was a door. I opened the door and there were concrete steps going out to the backyard. I said, okay, we passed number 1. There's a way to get Johnny out. God forbid there's a fire. Number 2, Johnny's 23. Johnny's coming in Friday and Saturday nights through the back door. He comes in at 1 and 2 in the morning and he's sleeping to 1 or 2 the next day. High exposure. He's got a load on. He's sleeping 10 and 12 hours. You've got to do a radon test. Oh, Vic, you're a pain. Yeah, I know I'm a pain. Guess what popped hot when we did our radon test? We took that, handed it to the seller and say, okay, your house is glowing. Let's fix it. Seller fixes it. Right? Material defect, medical issues. Okay? You must listen to what these people are talking about. They don't know enough to know they don't even know. But you're the responsible, you're the professional, you're there in their corner. You've got to guide these people, okay? Now, we move on. On page 11, it talks about carbon monoxide. Again, we know in Philadelphia, we have to have one within 15 feet of sleeping area and other locations, right? Mold and mildew. That's always a fun thing. Many, many years ago, I mean, mold and mildew is a real thing. There are people who are extremely sensitive, respiratory-wise, with this. 25 years ago, I showed a bank-owned property. That was even before anybody knew what a bank-owned property was. It was a gorgeous stone home, Mount Airy, I think it was. There was a line up the block to get in here. The bank opened the door. Everybody walks in. I walk in with my buyers, and the moment I walked in, I inhaled and I felt everything go like this, close up. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even breathe. I was labor breathing. I kind of broke away from them, went upstairs, and there was the culprit. It was a slate roof that was leaking up in the back bedroom. Green mold, like you see on the rocks by the little creeks, lakes, was growing inside the house. I said, guys, I'll meet you outside. I got to get out of here. Downstairs, outside. It took 4 hours for that wheezing to stop. Mold is a real thing. There's over 3,000 different types of mold. And we hear about one of the classics is Stachybotrys, which is a poisonous black mold. Now, we're not talking about the mold around your shower, okay? We are talking about the mold in the basement climbing 4 feet up a wall. That's a problem, okay? So we have to be conscious of, is there mold? Where is there mold? How is the mold going to be remediated? Got to look. You got to use all your senses, right? When you're walking through properties, how you're going to handle these issues. We're going to talk about utility systems, heating and air conditioning. Chapter 3, page 13. There's a wonderful artist rendering on the bottom left of page 13, gas warm air furnace. Let's take a look at that. On the left-hand side, you'll see where it says gas line, and then it says a gas valve. This is black galvanized piping coming from the ceiling down. So this black piping comes down, and you see there's a shutoff, and then it makes a 90-degree turn. Makes that 90-degree turn to enter into the unit. There's also a small additional bit of piping here. Why is there a small additional piece of piping? Anybody know what that is? Okay. I always knew it as what was called a dog leg, but I've been corrected by others, so I don't know what to call it. But I will tell you, there is a purpose for that. And when you don't see that, that's telling you something. That's telling you a non-professional put that heater in. The reason for that small extension of piping is this. As the gas comes in, it could have some moisture in it. Water and moisture would be heavier than the gas itself. So when it goes to make that 90-degree turn for the gas to enter into the unit, the moisture or water will drop and not go into the unit. It goes into the lid. And we're talking the most infinitesimal amount of moisture as it is. But it has a place to go. In your unit is not, and it drops further down into that pipe. You will not see that, you may not see that if a non-professional didn't do this. It's a little waste of time. It's a little shortcut. No, it's there for a reason. Now, when the gas makes the 90-degree turn and enters into the burner area, what would you see if you were looking at that? Those of you who go to your home inspections, and you should, you want to be able to stick your head in there and watch what that home inspector's doing. Stand behind him or her. What there are long tubulars going from the front of the system to the rear of the system. These tubulars have little holes in them, about the size of the dimension of a pencil. These little holes is where the flame pops out. The home inspector may say to you, Vic, do me a favor, run upstairs and turn the heat on. Yeah, okay. Now here's his reasoning for that. He's got his head in front of this heater. Why? He wants to see. He wants to smell. He wants to see, what does the flame look like? It's very important that the flame have a very particular shape. It's important of what colors he sees, which will be blue, orange, and yellow. An excess of certain colors could mean that the mix is too rich and too much gas is coming through and not burning off properly. What if the flame shape is incorrect and it's some odd looking shape? What is that telling him? Is that telling him that these holes over time have deteriorated and they've collapsed within themselves, causing a large gap rather than the little holes, and we have an abnormal, erratic flame blowing? He can't get down there fast enough. If he's upstairs turning it on, he can't get there. Okay, so visually, it's really important for him to see what's going on in there, right? Okay, so when you ran upstairs and turned the heat on, you often hear that, whoop, heater's kicking on, as the air forces the gas in. The blower kicks on, goes across the burner, the gas comes across, we've lit the burner, burner lights the gas, the fan kicks on, and this now heated air is being pushed up the inside through the heat exchanger, okay? You'll note it has vertical lines which are simulating that of the ductwork, and then it goes right to left. The hot air is now going through the ductwork up and out, right? For a gas system to work, not only does it blow out air, it has to bring in air to the system. On the right-hand side, you'll see it says on the far right, return airflow. And this is the ductwork that is returning air from throughout the house back into the system. A good place to say, where is that filter? Is almost always should be on the return side of the heater. So if you're like, wait a minute, I'm looking at the heater, I know the air is going up and out, and let me see, oh, here's ducting that's coming down the side of the heater, this is the return, that's where your filter should be. Now, a couple things. As a listing agent, you want to remind your sellers a couple things. One is, I'll tell you something. I've been hundreds and hundreds of home inspections. If your roof is in good shape and your heating system is clean and well maintained, the rest of the house, generally speaking, is going to be a half decent house. Nobody sees their roof. That is a mental tickler that seller has to have that roof inspected and maintenance. We all forget about the furnace. All we know is we're turning it on, turning it off, turning it on, turning it off. A well-maintained furnace is having the filters cleaned on a regular basis. You may want to recommend having your HVAC system cleaned and serviced before you list the house. When a home inspector opens up that heater and he sees it's clean, when he pulls out that filter and he sees it's clean, he's going to comment on that. And he's going to make a notation, not only verbally, but in writing. The condition of the heater was noted to be cleaned and serviced. You will then supply that invoice in your documents when you're sending over your seller's property disclosure statement. It means a lot to have a clean heater. You'll also notice on that side, there is the electronic emergency switch. And generally speaking, you know, this is a very rough artist rendering, but it's pretty accurate. This is very much how most hot air systems look. It gives you a real good general overview, okay? Things to understand, thermostats. Now, thermostats today can go from one extreme to the other. It's actually been added in our agreement of sale under inclusions of the fancy thermostats and house control devices have been added. Make sure if the home your buyer is purchasing has one of these really fancy thermostats that you get the book on it, because I know they have a place and a lot of people love them, and they turn it off at a certain time and it turns on at a certain time, and we save energy and cost. I'm old. They don't work for me. I had the fancy one removed, and the dial version that you see here is what I had replaced with. It took the plumber weeks to find one, but he did. I'm just not good at that stuff, okay? But there's some very basic thermostats, and they show the digital type and they show the dial type that does both heat, off, and cool. Pretty basic, pretty simple. But you want to make sure on these real sophisticated ones that you do get the booklet for that, or maybe somebody can explain it. I've seen home inspectors stumble trying to get these things together because they can be quite confusing. When you see on page 15, it's talking about on the lower left, the distribution of ducts. So this slice of a home has a basement, right? You see the subterranean, and you see the furnace is here. At the top of the furnace, the hot air is going up across the ceiling of the basement and then up through the flooring into the bedroom right above it, right? So you see the warm air is coming out. On the other side, though, you'll notice that there are some ductwork. And what that ductwork is the return part. The air that was brought into the bedroom now has to leave the bedroom. And it comes back through the ductwork and makes its way back into the heating system. Any good home inspector worth their salt carries tissues with them. And when the heating system is on, he will take the tissue and he'll toss it at the return duct. He'll just kind of let it go. And you'll see the tissue in a well-maintained system will go and gently stick to the return duct. That's showing you that it's drawing the air. It drew the tissue towards it. See, that's a good sign. When that tissue doesn't stick and goes to the floor, we got a problem. About 10 or 12 years ago, sold an end-of-the-road townhouse in Bensalem. I'm at the inspection, and we're up on the second floor. Then the home inspector keeps taking a tissue, and he puts it on the return vent. Every return vent in every room did not stick. Just fluttered to the floor. And he looked at me, and I looked at him. Then we went down to the first floor. Every tissue on the return vent. When we get downstairs, the lower level where the heating system was like somewhat subterranean. The backyard went down where the slider opened and you could walk right out. It had been finished off by the previous owner to the owner that owned the house at the time we were there. Something gnawed at me. I said to my home inspector, do me a favor, pop that ceiling. It was a drop ceiling. Tell me what you say. Got up on the step stool, moved the panel, and started to laugh. And he said to me, Vic, I don't know how you get these sixth senses about things. The return vent, the return ductwork had been cut by whomever finished that basement. There was no return air going back to the heating system. Hence why the tissue wasn't sticking. It was just falling down. These are the kind of things that do not be afraid to talk to your home inspectors. When you cock your head like a robin, and something don't sound right to you, open your mouth, ask the question. See, he knew something was wrong. He just didn't know where it was until I said, look up, pop that ceiling and look. And that's where it was. They had cut the return. Not good, right? Okay. So these are the kind of things you learn. You need to go to home inspections. You need to understand how a house ticks. What makes it, it's alive. Every house is alive. And so we have to figure out when there's a hiccup with something, it's like it's got a bad cold. It's not right. We got to figure out what the problem is here, right? Okay. Yes. Well, do the best you can. You know, under the COVID situation, we're not going to be here forever, kids. Okay? Maybe another month or so, 6 weeks at the most. We'll go green and everybody can be there. I will say, if I wasn't at a home inspection and then read the home inspection report, I oftentimes had to call the home inspector and say, I don't understand what you're saying here. I don't understand what the photo is you're telling me. Being there helps you to understand what the conversation is about the property. Many times I've had agents come to me and ask for help, and I'm reading this home inspection. I'm like, I don't understand what this home inspector is saying. I've had to call them. So under the COVID situation, we do what we got to do. But once this all passes and we're all green and we're doing like we used to, you should be there because you're the professional to help guide the first-time home buyer, especially who's just learning how to change a light bulb because mommy and daddy did it for them, how any of this works. So you need to be another set of eyes and ears, okay? All right, now on the bottom right of page 15, it talks about a warm air furnace with a damper. Now, notice this artist rendering. See how this cylinder-like piping is coming up through the top of this heating system, and it shows that it's going to the chimney. So we see the supply line that's going up to our ductwork, and then we have the cylinder piece. What is this cylinder piece of metal going to the chimney for? Why is it there? Any idea? Some of you have taken this class before. Why is that there? Oh my God, what am I doing with you people? That is your carbon monoxide. That is your carbon monoxide leaving the home. It leaves the home through the chimney. Chimneys are very valuable pieces of equipment in a home. And we'll talk more about chimneys. But in this artist rendering, they have shown you inside that tubular piece of metal, there is a damper, something that has wings. I'm on page 15. Look on page 15.
I'm sorry, you're on page 15 of what?
Of the book. The book. We sent out the book.
Oh, I don't have the book. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They sent the book out. Where? I don't know. But I know they sent the book out.
Okay.
So it's probably a Alexa question.
Okay, I'll look for it. Thank you.
Okay. There's a damper in there. So it's on the chat. Okay. So the damper, the mindset for the damper was this. Oh, if air is leaving my heating system and going up the chimney, that means in reverse, cold air is coming in. That was the worst thought ever. Because they would then turn it, not allowing a full open passage for carbon monoxide to get out. I have to say, I haven't seen one in forever. But If you're at a home inspection, an older home, such as a grandmom house, and I actually had somebody say to me, what's a grandmom house? And I giggled to myself. Grandmom house is that older home that's probably working in the early 70s and decor of bathrooms might be in the 50s. The kitchen was redone in the 70s. It's neat. It's clean. She's working off her Social Security. When something breaks, we get it fixed, but we don't remodel anything. That's a grandmom house, right? So it's probably an older home. You may look up and you'll actually see a damper on that cylinder that is taking away that carbon monoxide. Make note of that and bring it up to the attention of these home inspectors. Listen, they're only human and they're doing a dozen things at one time. They're answering questions from the buyer. They're thinking what they got to put in their laptop. They're going through their checklist. They're human. They could miss it. Point it out. Ask the home inspector, what's that? What's that? Have him tell you what it is. Do we want that, Mr. Home Inspector? No, he's probably going to say, no, you don't want that. And so in your wish list with your reply to inspection to the seller, you may ask to have that removed, right? Okay. All right. We move on. Talks about on page 16, the different types of air furnaces. There are the horizontal type of furnace that would lay horizontally in an attic and blow out air, right? They talk about those in slab foundational types, how they would have the ductwork in the foundation, the slab, I should say, slab construction, and how the ductwork would work on that. Warm air furnaces in garage. They're small. Those of you who work in the burbs, it's not uncommon to see one of these guys in the garage, like not for nothing. That's where Pop's out there tinkering. He's got his own little heater out there. And then there's your oil burner. Oil burners do exist, without a doubt. Now, with that said, the concept of how the system works, heats the air, pushes it up, sends it through ductwork, is very much identical to that of the concept of gas. It's just a different source of energy. The source of energy is oil, not gas, in this photo or this artist rendering that they're showing on page 16. But the concept is all the same. If you look at the warm air furnace with oil burner artist rendering, what should be the first thing you notice different in the artist rendering of that compared to the gas one? The really good gas picture on page 13. What should stand out to you that's missing? Look at page 13 and then look at page 16, the artist rendering. What should hit you like boink? Okay, I'll help you with that. Remember the gas line I talked about, that little extension? We don't have that on the oil side, do we? Because the oil would never have moisture in it. So they do not need that extension for the moisture to drop on that 90-degree turn into the system. Make sense? No guts. We know guts that. All right. Let's look on page 17 on the bottom right. High efficiency warm air furnaces. Now, a clear giveaway when you're showing a property. And I'm going to use the illustration of a row home in the city, but this really applies to anywhere. In this artist rendering on a high efficiency warm air furnace, on the left-hand side where it says outside, it is pointing to two PVC pipes. One is an intake that brings air into the system, And the other one is the exhaust for the carbon monoxide. When you see PVC piping coming out of the side of the house, you're like, ah, this is a high energy system. Now, with that said, everything else runs pretty much the same, except the carbon monoxide is not going up the chimney. Is it because we have no chimney and it's newer construction? Or is it because this is a rehab, we've abandoned the chimney and we've broke through the foundation and shoved out our PVC piping because we have a high efficiency? If that is the reason we have converted to a high efficiency system and abandoned the chimney, it is very important that that home inspector is taking a good look at that chimney. Okay? Was it abandoned properly? Or when the home inspector gets up on that chimney, it's a hot mess. I'm running into some frustrations with home inspectors. And I have my favorites. But I'm finding home inspectors are doing the drone roof inspection, which I just about lose my mind with. We have litigation, I know of litigation right now over a drone roof inspection that leaked 3 months later. See, a drone can't feel a soft spot on a roof. A drone can't evaluate the valleys of a shingle roof. A drone may or may not truly see the masonry construction around the crown of the chimney or look down a chimney if it doesn't have a cap, right? I am not a fan. Not for a hot minute am I a fan. Agents who don't know enough to know are not voicing their opinion with these buyers in regards to inspectors who do not walk a roof. You need to have that come to Jesus conversation with them. I listed a property yesterday. They took my advice and hired a home inspector, someone I recommended, who's a great home inspector. And he said, I'm going to do a drone for your roof. I almost dropped my teeth when they told me because I was shocked he said that. Now, I'm the agent representing the seller. I'm not as concerned about it is what it is. But I told them this, listen to me. When we buy, that home inspector is getting on the roof. That is a must, in my opinion. You do as you deem necessary, but to get a true evaluation. That actually happened about 4 years ago. A young couple, I sold them a split level home just outside the city in Warminster, up Street Road. It was a multiple offer bid. We lost. The seller was a real estate agent. 2 weeks later, I get an email from her. She says, hey, are your buyers still looking? And I'm like, I look on the calendar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 weeks. Call her up. I said, what happened to the home inspection? She said, those buyers left because the home inspector put a drone up there and said there was something wrong with the roof. I said, really? Let me have that report. Sends the report. I said to my buyers, what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, we really like the house, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, if you really like the house, there was a home inspector at the time who used to do historical roofing inspections and was a manager for a large roofing company, knows roofs very well. I recommended that home inspector be the one to come out. We put another offer in, it was accepted. That home inspector went out at 69 years old, threw up the ladder, ran up that roof, walked the entire roof, came back down, and looked at that young man and said, there is not a thing wrong with this roof. So technology has a place in this world. It doesn't have a place for everything. Just as people were buying property sight unseen, that's a good example, sight unseen. They didn't feel it, they didn't touch it, they didn't walk it, they didn't flush it, they didn't do anything. Perhaps we can compare that to a drone. In comparison, to have the home inspector feel it, touch it, walk it, right? There's the difference. Really, really important. Okay, moving on. Page 18 talks about the fans and motors. We don't need to know anything about that. We're going to talk about filters, and it starts on page 19. Now, remember where I told you the filter is on the return side, right, of that venting is where the filter is. When you turn to page 20, it talks about all different kinds of filters. And it starts with the fiberglass filter that many people use, and you're probably familiar with. It's very meshy and not see-through, but like you could see light through it, and it's okay at best, all right? Those type of filters allow airflow very easily through it. So it's only picking up the big boulders of stuff coming through. Dust bunnies. Pet hair, not so much, right? Pollen, not at all. When you need something for your health, allergies perhaps, or better, cleaner air, it is much more common to see the pleated paper filters, the 3M products perhaps. Now, if you talk to an HVAC guy, they lose their mind on this, because the HVAC guy is going to say this. Listen to me. If you put one of those paper filters in, now remember, the air is coming this way, right, from the ductwork. It's got to push through the filter and enter into the heating system. If you're using a paper filter, here's the air coming through the ductwork. The heater has to suck really hard to get that air through the paper. It's also grabbing every Tom, Dick, and Harry particle known to man, especially pet dander and pollens. In comparison to the fiberglass one where stuff's kind of flying in and out. It catches what it catches. You know, catches, catch can. So an HVAC guy is going to say, oh, you're putting a lot of pressure on your HVAC system, your heating system. You have to evaluate that. You have to make a business decision. Am I going to breathe better? I have 2 cats and a dog and a kid with allergies. You're going to have to make a decision. But there are very good paper type filters that really do grab everything. The moral of this story is, regardless of the type of filter that is used, regular changing of the filter according to the manufacturer is huge, right? Because we're defeating all of our purposes here, okay? Again, when that heater's in good shape, that roof's in good shape, the rest of the house is generally going to be in decent shape, because there are things out of sight, out of mind. We don't look at the roof and we forget about the heater. We just turn it on and the air. We only care about it when it doesn't work, right? So those things are really important to keep in mind on. Also talks about electronic air filters that are out there. Let's look on page 22. 22, we're going to talk about boiler systems. Now, a home inspector will have a discrepancy on what I'm about to say, but a well-maintained boiler system, it's had somebody come out every year, tweak it, clean it, prepare it for the cold winter, can easily last 50 years. Easy. Your home inspector is going to say 35. If it's maintained, 50 years, without a doubt. Now, how many here grew up in a house that had radiator heat or hot water baseboard? Anybody? Ooh, yay! So you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So the radiator heat in the winter, your mom would call you in You're out playing in the snow. You're 10 years old. And she's like, it's lunch. Put your mittens and your boots by the radiator. And so you take off your mittens and you put them on the radiator because it's hot. It's moist air, right? It's hot. And you would put them there and they would dry pretty fast when you ate your grilled cheese and your tomato soup lunch, right? Now, with that said, there's an illustration on page 22. And it shows you how this system is working. Now, let me say this. I didn't mention it when we talked about hot air. But a hot air system, along with a water system, so that's your boiler, right, need to be what is known as a closed system. Does anybody have an idea what that term means, a closed system? Okay. If we're talking about a radiator, which is a wet system, right? It's water. If it's not closed, if for some reason there's a leak somewhere in something, what happens?
You can get air in the system.
We also can have water leaking, right? It's a water system. So we'll know that it's a plumbing water leak, right? Is there a pinhole? We see a wet spot in the middle of the wall. Like, where the hell did that come from? Ah, we got a pinhole there, right? Same thing happens in a hot air system. A hot air system needs to be a closed system. And when it is not sealed properly with the proper HVAC taping, is that high, shiny silver tape, not duct tape. It almost looks like aluminum foil. It's so shiny. That is a special type of tape that is used to seal off and close it tight. Because if there are gaps in the ductwork, then the hot air or the cold air, when the central air is on, is escaping. So they need to be closed systems. So when you look here on a hot water system, we go over to the thermostat and we kick it up, right? Ooh, it's freezing in here. Turn that heat up. So you turn the heat up and you hear, because the flame starts right on your gas. Now, what is that flame doing? What is the purpose of the flame starting in your gas system?
To boil the water?
To boil the water. Love it. There you go. That's exactly what's happening. We need to boil some water here, right? That water now is going to be forced up the piping to fill the cavities, to fill the piping for the radiators in the illustration here, or the baseboard that's running along the perimeter of the room. There is a copper pipe in there, and it's heating up that copper pipe, right, to heat the room. Okay. So that too has a return system. So as the water goes up and fills the radiator with heated water, so that in turn heats the room, the water circulates back down to a pump that forces it back into the, oh my God, the heater. So now, notice something on the right-hand side. Two things I want you to say. One is an expansion tank. See how it's right under the flooring of the second floor? Anybody have an idea why we have that? All right, let's think for a minute. When something heats, what happens to it? It expands. Cold contracts, heat expands. Now, this is a closed system, right? Because we know if it's not closed, we got water squirting. So this is a closed system. So when the water is heated and it expands, where's it going to go? Oh, we don't want to blow out something, right? So they created this tank. Now, when you're doing home inspections with a home that is hot water-based heat, you're going to look up between the joist in the ceiling of the basement, very close proximity to the boiler itself, and you will see the expansion tank. In most cases. On rare occasions, you'll find them somewhere else, but in most cases, that's where it is, in the ceiling of the basement, in between the joists, at the proximity of the boiler system. So as the heat grows and the water expands, it has a place to shoot off that extra water, so we don't have pipes blowing out, right? Make sense? Okay. Steam boiler, I can honestly say I don't think I've ever even seen one. But something that's very important here in that illustration on the top of 22, you see the expansion tank. Now look down, and on the right-hand side, you'll see relief valve. That is a temperature pressure relief valve. That exact valve is located on your water heater. We're going to talk about the purpose of that when we get to the water heater. The exact same thing, okay? We turn the page and we look on page 23, and again, very similar functionality of a heater or a boiler when it is an oil burner. But that's weird. They show an warm air burner. They've already done that. That's weird. I wonder why they have it twice. But if your boiler is oil, the same thing happens. The oil is the energy to cause the igniting of the flame, which is oil instead of gas, to boil the water. Now, a couple things you have to remember about oil heat though. Let's say you get a listing of an old house. Maybe it's 100 years old. Maybe it's 70 years old in Fishtown, Port Richmond. And it's oil heat. Aunt Lucy passed away. The executor of the estate is from Wisconsin. It's her nephew, Billy. And Billy calls the office, and you're sitting floor time, and you get a come list. You go over and you check out the house, and you see everything looks really old downstairs, and the oil tank is down there. Old oil systems, old oil burner systems, hot water systems, do not have an automatic shutoff valve. If the tank empties out, you will destroy the burner. That heater will be destroyed. The new boilers have a safety valve. So if the tank gets to 1/8 or wherever the safety valve level is, it will shut off the boiler. It won't heat anymore because it's saying, yo, idiot, you got to fill the tank. Old ones don't have an idiot mode on it. That house is vacant. That executor of the estate has made you responsible for this. You better find out, did Aunt Lucy have an automatic drop of oil? Who has been giving her her oil for the last 50 years? You've got to set up some sort of a system to make sure that tank doesn't empty in the dead of the winter, causing the heating system to be destroyed. Okay, pay attention. All right, air conditioning. Let's look on page 24. Gives a good illustration on 24 on the left-hand side of an air conditioning system with a warm air furnace. Okay, so we look on the outside and we see the condenser is there. Okay, so the condenser is that 3x3x4 box that sits outside your house. That in the summer when you walk by it, you're like, whew, a lot of hot air coming out of that thing, geez, right? That's your condenser unit. Your condenser unit has a fan and coils, and the refrigerant line goes into the furnace system. Now, what happens is when you turn your air on, air is forced through the furnace and it goes to where the cooling coils are. See that? It's called an A coil because it's shaped like the letter A coil, okay? the air passes by these refrigerated coils. They're cold. Well, what they do is they cool the air. Now we send the air up past the cool coils and the blower pushes it throughout the house. Does the same circulating idea as it did as a heater, except we're not sending up hot air anymore. Now we're sending up air that becomes cooled by the coils and is pushed out through our ductwork. Okay? The hot air, though, in the house is now pushed out through the condenser. When it's humid out, those of you who have central air, and you're in your mechanical room, or you're in your basement, and there is a clear tube, so big around, clear tube that's running out of your heater, and it goes to the utility sink, or it goes to the drain in the floor. Maybe it goes directly into your sewer line. What is that clear pipe, flexible tubing? Where's that clear, flexible tubing going, and what's it doing? Why do we have that?
Isn't that the condensation? It's taking the
Right.
water out to drain, hopefully.
That's right. It's your condensate line. A clogged condensate line is a very typical problem when a customer calls and says, my air's not working. It's all clogged up, right? Because what the exchanging of air it's doing is pulling moisture out. When there's less moisture in the air, your skin feels cooler, right? Like in Arizona, they have dry 107 degree air. 107 in Philadelphia, kill me now, right? But they're like, it's dry air, because there really is a difference. Once you pull out humidity, it makes the feel to the skin very different, okay? Now, on the top of 24, air conditioning exterior electrical disconnect. All central air condensers need to have their own emergency shutoff right there at the unit. Okay. Let's see. If we move on to page 26, 26 on the bottom left. Heat pumps. What is a heat pump? Okay, so if we read the third paragraph, a heat pump transfers heat from the exterior coils to an interior coil in the warm air heating system. Oh, okay, so it's pulling air from the outside to the inside coils in the warm air heating system. A heat pump provides effective heating in areas where exterior temperatures are moderate. I gotta tell you, the suburbs of Philadelphia is probably as far north anyone should consider putting a heat pump. Any of you grown up or live in a home now with a heat pump? No? Nobody has a home with a heat pump? Okay. If you ever lived in a home with a heat pump and you turn the heat on and you're like, Jesus, I'm freezing. And you go to stand in front of that vent, it's not that warm, fuzzy feeling. It's not real warm and you're like, ooh, that feels so good. It's a very tepid air, because the reality is, as we keep reading, a heat pump is like a central air conditioning, the condenser working backwards. Excuse me. So you know all that hot air you feel outside when the air conditioner is working because it's pulling the heat out? Well, it's like that condenser working backwards. They're sending all that hot air in, pulling the cold air out. You'll find heat pumps are used more often, especially in tight places. in condo conversions where it would be difficult to run all those gas lines. And if each unit is going to have their own heating system, you know, up in the ceiling in the condo, excuse me, they're going to use a heat pump. First off, the square footage is smaller. Second, the units are smaller. And B, they can come all electric. Therefore, on condo conversions of big warehouses, apartment conversions, whatever, you'll often find an electric heat pump is the source of the energy used to heat the house. It also then will work in the summertime in reverse as your air conditioning system. So my sister lives in the southern part of North Carolina. Clearly, their overall temperature is warmer than ours. So they have 2-zone heat pump system. They're using a ton of AC in comparison to what we are. So generally speaking, we flip it on in May, our air conditioning, and we flip it off in October. Thanksgiving, they might have their air conditioning on. I mean, they really carry a long season. They may be turning their AC on at the end of March or the beginning of April, depending on how the world is that particular time. So that is a heat pump system. Up in Bucks County, Newtown, and further up, it does a job, but it's not the best way, in my opinion, to have a heat source is to use a heat pump, because it's really teetering on as far north as it should go. But they do a job, and they get you warm, and it's just that warm, fuzzy feeling, you know? Talks about the ductwork again. Again, it's the same thing. It's forcing hot air through the ducts, got to return through the duct, right? It's all the same stuff. Talks about the garage. You could have one out there. Look on page 28. The bottom of 28 shows that damper again on that piping that's going to go to the chimney to release your carbon monoxide. See how it's like a valve, like a piece of metal that flips back and forth, right? You never wanted that closed off. You don't want the carbon monoxide coming back in the house, right? All right, look on page 29. 29 on the bottom talks about a humidifier. Often you will find on a hot air system a humidifier, an attachment bolted in to your hot air system. The purpose of this made sense. The concept was that we need to add moisture to the air because a hot air system removes the moisture out. So if you grew up in a house that had a hot air system, your brother was rubbing his socks up against the carpeting and then running and chasing you and touching you so we got that little electrical spark going, okay, static electricity, because there was not enough moisture in the house. So the concept of adding moisture to the air really made sense, except there's a little caveat. The last course I took for my broker's license was sort of like a class like this. It was the biggest class. There were 25 of us, only 4 women. And the instructor was someone I so am impressed by and so thinks so highly of. Jules Falcone, who, Jesus, he better be retired by this point. He's got to be close to 80. But brilliant, and I mean brilliant. He did the class with one of the big home inspection companies, Pillar to Post, one of them. And he was speaking about the humidifier and how much he liked the humidifier. Now, for some of you who may or may not know, in another life, I used to be a nurse. So I always sit in the back of the room because I want to see what everybody's doing. I raised my hand and I said, Jules, I got a question though. Taking in consideration 3 things that are needed for bacteria to grow are dark, moist, and warm. Is not that box on the side there a wonderful petri dish? And he hesitated and he looked at me. He said, I never thought of it that way. When you've seen enough of these, oh my God, they are so gross on the inside. You run screaming in the woods like your hair's on fire. Keep in mind that grossness, the air is pushing past it, and God only knows what's blowing out of into your living room. Do you ever meet people that the kids are always sick? Jesus, what is the matter with my kids? They're always sick. Well, they've got bacteria, God knows what, blowing through their house. When I'm at a home inspection, right in front of the home inspector, I'll ask him what his thoughts are. More than not, they're going to say, eh. And then I give my little spin. Buyers can do as they wish, but I highly recommend that be removed. Remove that caca. Unless you are a seller. Every Sunday after church, while your wife makes lunch, you go downstairs, you pull it apart, you go to the utility sink, you wash it with bleach, you wipe everything out with bleach, and you put it all back on. If you're not doing that every week, you better consider moving that thing. There's other ways to bring moisture into a home. That one's not my fan. So something to keep in mind when you're doing a home inspection. Next, we're going to talk about electric. Okie dokie. Let's look here on page 30. How there are many ways to get electricity into a home. So you look at the top one where it has an underground service entry. There's a transformer on the parcel. Now this is something you're going to see in the burbs a lot, right? A transformer on somebody's lawn. That transformer is going underground to the street generally to hook up the main electric. Then from the transformer to your home, you'll see how it goes piping underground, underground, underground. Then it comes up through the ground, goes to the meter. Then from the meter, it goes back through the foundation and to the breaker box. Oh, okay, that's how I get my electricity. How about we look at the bottom one here on the left? Oh, it comes in from the transformer underground and it goes up to the meter, and then all the wires pop out, and then that's where it goes to my breakers, okay? Or how about the one on the bottom right? This bottom right one has a basement. Any of you who have sold property in Philadelphia, primarily, let's review our 2-story, 3-bedroom, 2-story, 3-bedroom, 1-bath house in Deep South Philly with the little postage stamp backyard. Now you go out there and you look up. What do you say? You see these wires coming from some pole somewhere, attaching itself to the side of the house, working its way down the meter, through the meter, into the foundation to where your electrical box is, right? Now, in your home inspection report, there may be a comment that the home inspector feels that that swinging wire is swinging too low. The only person who can correct that, just to let you know, is PICO. So the seller, if you're going to ask the seller to have that done, they have to come out, they have to notify PICO, and PICO has to come out and make that correction. No electrician is going to touch that, FYI. Look on page 31. Excuse me. This is a very good illustration of electric circuit breaker box panel. Okay. At the top, see it says main breaker? There's 2 breakers, and then you'll note there's a bar that's connected the 2 together vertically. They're like Siamese twins. They will always shut off and shut on together. They're buddies, never to separate. Now, if you open an electrical box, and this is what you see, you see that the main shutoff is on the bottom. Yeah, I turned it upside down. Main shutoff is on the bottom. What's that tell you? It tells you Uncle Joe's been here. A non-professional hooked this up. Now, Uncle Joe's a great guy, but Uncle Joe's not a professional. A professional electrician would never have done this. Inside the box may be perfect. Probably not, but he did it wrong right from the get. It never should be on the bottom. It should always be at the top. Now, you'll note when you look at these, there is another one in the illustration called a double breaker, and it's a 220 volt. Again, they're barred together. They're Siamese twins. They will always on and off together because at 220, it's pulling a lot of electricity. The single breakers are known as a 110 volt. Your average receptacle throughout the house, okay? Let's look on page 32. Excuse me. Circuit breaker resets. Now, when you were a kid, did your mom ever send you down the basement because she blew a fuse or tripped a breaker? Right. Back. I blew a fuse or tripped a breaker. Go downstairs and fix that. So you run downstairs and you open the box like a dumbass and you're staring at it. And you're like, what am I even looking at? Well, this is what you could be looking at. They give you a few different samples here. So they're showing sample A illustration that it's a completely on and off position. And the on position means that's not the one that tripped. Clearly, it's on. If it's in the off position, oops, that must be the one that tripped. So we take it and we flip it to the on side and boop, your mom screams, got it, thanks. Then you hear the mixer going, bzzz. All right. Now maybe you open the box and you see something more like sample B. Sample B has an on position and it has an off position, but it also has the tripping position when it's in the middle of the switch. Oh, so that's the one that tripped. Or maybe you have the type of box that shows a tripping position when a little red light or a little red flag is indicated. You're like, oh, that's the one that tripped. Okay, there you go. On the right, to the right of that is electrical main fuse panels. Fuses do exist, and they are still found in homes. When you flip over onto page 33, you will see the different type of fuse and breakers. There is the screw-in kind, known as the Edison fuse, sort of like a button, and it's glass, and you thread it in. Or they have the cartridge which are elongated glass. What would happen is you would see a break inside the glass. That's how you knew which one needed to be replaced. Talks about different types of wiring. There's plastic sheathing of a wiring. There's metal conduit and a flexible armed cable, also known as a conduit. Anytime wiring is going underground, it has to be placed into a conduit, a protective shield from the elements of the ground, right? Let's look at the different types of outlets we have. Look at I call them faces on page 34. We have the typical 10 volt, 15 amp. That's what we see around our house all the time, right? It's got two eyes, one eye a little bit bigger than the other, and a mouth. That's where we plug everything in. But maybe we need something with a little more oomph, which would be a 220, 20 amp volt. Don't see that a whole lot, but what you will see is the big guy on the bottom. 220, 30 amp. He's really big. Like, I'm not kidding. 5 inches tall by maybe 3 inches wide by 3 inches deep, big black thing. What two appliances in your mind uses a ton of energy that you're going to need that big 220, 30 amp receptacle?
The dryer?
What? A dryer? Yes. The electric dryer is one of them. Absolutely. What else?
Refrigerator?
Nope. No refrigerator. Pull yours out because you need to clean behind it anyway. I'm telling you, I already know. Pull yours out. And what are you going to find? You're going to find the 110 15 amp. Just one little plug that plugs in. Where are you going to find your heavy duty need for that much electric?
Oven.
What, baby?
Oven.
Oven. That's correct. The oven range draws an amazing amount of electricity. So it's your electric dryer and your electric range where those systems are needed. Okay? Now, let's look on page 35. Couple things. At the top, it talks about polarity. See, it shows a light bulb. And then it says reverse polarity. How the energy powers into a light switch. When you do a home inspection, the home inspector will randomly choose outlets that he puts a plug in. It's a horizontal piece of equipment with lights. And he's looking how the lights light up. It's not uncommon to find what is known reverse polarity. Below the illustration of the light bulb on the third paragraph, what happens if you power a device into a reverse polarity? That is, when the plug is reversed, meaning the wiring was done backwards inside. Stereo equipment may buzz. Electrical and computer equipment may be damaged. Lights and lamps pose a serious hazard. When turning off the switch, you would be turning off the neutral or the return of the electricity in the wiring, not to be live the hot wire. This means that even when the lamp is off, the ring around the base of the bulb is still alive. You will find that often in a home inspection report. When you see that in a home inspection report, what's your first clue?
That Uncle Joe installed it?
Fabulous. Uncle Joe was there. Any good electrician is never going to reverse the wiring, are they? Right? So God bless Uncle Joe. He's been here. Now, here's the other little FYI. Look at the illustration of the two different types of outlets on page 35. We have the old school outlet that just has two eyes, no mouth, right? That means they have no ground wire. Yet the one on the bottom has two eyes and a mouth. That means that mouth is the ground. In your home inspection, the home inspector is going to comment on multiple receptacles without a ground wire. How can that be remedied? Or better yet, let's back it up one. Why is there no ground to these receptacles? That's the first question. Why is there no ground to these receptacles? They only have eyes, no mouth. Many years ago, the wiring that was put in the house, pulled through the walls, had no ground wire. Didn't exist. That's why the outlets just had eyes. The only way to correct that problem is each one of them have to be converted to a ground fault interrupter system. The ground fault interrupter system, we're going to see on the next page, has to do with those funny looking receptacles with the button. They shut themselves off right there. They always have to be installed when the receptacle is within 6 feet of water. The only way to correct that is that each one of those eyes only have to be converted to a ground fault interrupter system. There's no other way to do it. Okay. Excuse me. Now, let's look here at a GFCI, ground fault circuit interrupter. There are 3 artist renderings. I want you to look to the one on the right that shows 2 receptacles with eyes and a mouth. And to the left of that is that funny one with the button in the middle. That's the GFCI in the middle. Now note, you've taken the class and you're quite sure of yourself. You're at a home inspection and you look in the kitchen and all you see are mouths, receptacles. You don't see the funny rectangle one. You say to yourself, ha, they don't have any ground fault in here, damn it. Be careful, because here's why. One ground fault that you might not have seen can run down the line and attach itself electrically to other receptacles and protect them along with themselves. They run the line and they will shut off if water is in contact with them because they're attached or hooked onto the rectangle guy. So just because it has the face and not the funny rectangular shape doesn't mean it's not treated as a GFCI, because a GFCI is 3 outlets back. How do we detect that? Well, we don't. That's the home inspector's job because he puts in a special instrument to check it. So before you open your mouth, wait and see. The other thing is, see where it says on the left-hand side, GFCI breaker reset? It could look like a face, but it actually has the tripping agent inside the breaker box. So you're thinking, oh, it don't look right, but it could be right because the breaker box has that breaker will trip inside the box rather than at the receptacle. Now, for the ground fault interrupter, the one on the bottom left, it shows that funny rectangular shape. It has a test button and or, again, it shows where it might be inside a breaker box and how it would look. Okay? So these are the different things you're going to be noticing. So before you open your mouth, wait and see what that home inspector says. I'll tell you where you commonly don't find it, and you'll find this on a home inspection report, which is important, is at the washer. They often, that receptacle, remember, a washing machine only needs a 110, just a regular plug. But it's within 6 feet of water, right? Because it's going in the utility sink. It's discharging. Oftentimes, that is not a ground fault interrupter, as it should be. So you have to pay attention to that. The last thing we're going to talk about today is the arc fault interrupter. And that starts on the bottom right of 36 and it flips over to 37, where you see the ground fault would be in the breaker box. Now, the arc fault circuit interrupter has been around for a while now. But here's where this problem lies. We think of the ground fault circuit interrupter because of water. The arc fault has nothing to do with water. Electricity is a closed system. We talked about this earlier, right? With plumbing and water. We talked about a closed system with our airflow. Electricity is a closed system. When electricity is not, and it is forced because of improper application. So what do I mean by that? You stop over at your mom's and she's all upset. And you're like, Mom, what's the matter? She said, oh my God, Mrs. Jones' house burned down. What? What do you mean Mrs. Jones' house burned down? I know, it was terrible. She was at church and the fire engines were there. It was horrible. And it started in her bedroom. How did it start in her bedroom? She doesn't have a cat. She doesn't light candles. How the hell did this start in her bedroom? She wasn't even home. Ah, yeah. See, we as humans love our stuff, right? So let's go back to our 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 2-story home in South Philly. It's 14 wide. It's only so big. But we love this bedroom set that we bought. And it's a little on the chunky side. But we love the house. So we took our bedroom set and we moved in the new house and we plopped it in there. And you're like, God damn it, I have got to have this nightstand next to my bed with the light, of course. Now, to get that cord behind the headboard and into this one little receptacle, because the bedroom only has 2 receptacles because it was built in 1923, you kind of have to finagle it, and it's not, you got it in there, but it's a little cocked. It's not quite square in there. It's a little cocked. And you turn on the light and it worked. Okay, great. Yeah, well, not so great. See, electricity is a closed system. But because we're a little cocked, it has to arc. It has to jump to make it a closed system. One of those arcs lit something on fire. Maybe it was the shear that was right in front of it. So, especially in bedrooms, you often will find an arc fault circuit interrupter in the breaker box for bedrooms. Very common to find that. So that's the purpose, is for the arcing of electricity. So if the breaker feels or knows that the electric is arcing, it'll shut itself off. Hopefully we don't have a fire. Okay, kids, that's it for today. I'm not starting a new chapter. Our new chapter will be chapter 5, and we'll talk about plumbing and water. Another closed system. All right. Hope you guys have a good day. You learned something.
Thank you, Vicki. It was great.
You're welcome. See you.
Bye.
Bye.